Hello, everyone. Welcome back for another episode 52 Authors, 52 Weeks. Hold on to your seats today. I am joined with Elizabeth Entin, author of, now listen, if you have small children nearby, I want you to have them go into the other room, give them something to do, put on Miss Rachel or somebody on YouTube. But author of the book, WTF Just Happened, a Sciencey-Skeptic Explores Grief, Healing, and Evidence of an Afterlife. Welcome to the show, Elizabeth.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm excited because when I first saw the cover, I said, this is definitely going to be something different than what I've been reading, and I love it. Because I really believe that when you have a one-dimensional mindset, you do not grow. You need to be open to all the things, right? And then decide what works for you, what doesn't. So tell our
Great.
listening, viewing audience about you, your background, and then we'll get into the book.
Sure. So my background is I grew up in New York. Tied into the book, my background is I was raised culturally Jewish, but atheist, nothing like an afterlife would have ever been anything more than the tooth fairy. And unfortunately, my dad passed in 2015. So I decided to investigate if there would be any tangible, non-faith based, science based reason to think there could be an afterlife of any form. So, hence the total WTF my life has been the past few years.
Wow. And before we got on, you talked about how you kind of split your time between two different cities. As I was reflecting on that, I was thinking my husband and I talked about maybe buying some property in Arizona because it's so, it's so cold in Chicago, right?
So
But we're
cold,
like
right?
financially not gonna happen. So we've been here for over 50 years. So Chicago it is.
Right. I mean, Chicago's a great city. I mean, there's so many more places I would love to consider living if everywhere could be warm. If it was like 80 degrees, I know most people probably don't agree with me about it being that warm, but for me, I love the heat. If everywhere was like 80 degrees, there'd be a lot more places I'd consider.
Well, listen, I am all about 80 degrees year round. I could definitely dig it. Because when it gets cold here, you got to put on so many layers of clothes. And it has been really, we've been having some mild winters, so I can't complain. I don't know if the pandemic did it, but our winters have been great. So I'm not going to complain, but I would definitely love 80 degrees, 365 days a year.
Same. Trust me, same.
So let's dig into the book. And again, the title, WTF Just Happened. Tell us a little bit, and we want them to get their own copy of the book, right? But tell us a
Definitely.
little bit about the why. Why did you start to um, create this masterpiece? And for those of you who are like to sit down with a thick book, it is a thick book. When it first arrived in Amazon, I was like, whoa, you're gonna need some time to go through these pages.
Yes, it's actually the way it's written, a really fast read. Like I've gotten feedback that it looks long, but once
It's
people sit
fast.
down and read it, yeah, and in terms of how big it is, it's on Kindle. The audiobook will be coming out soon. So you don't always have to have a big, heavy book to carry with you. So the why, well, I guess multiple reasons. I had no intention at first when I started exploring all these topics of ever telling anyone. I'm like, this is so crazy sounding. I sound like such like a weird person. I'm keeping so totally secret. But the further I got, I was just like, the evidence became more and more tangible. And there were so many people and research departments at universities studying this topic, and nobody knows that at all. So there always seemed to be, like, for people dealing with grief or our own mortality, two options: either faith-based religion, which I have complete respect for, but if you're going for fact and evidence, it's great to believe that there isn't backup. And then the other option that consciousness is created by a brain, which is kind of the prevailing scientific theory, and this thought that there's no evidence for anything else. And that's just not true. I mean, you can't say it's proof, but it's very strong evidence. And just, I think the amount of people whose lives could change if they knew that would be really significant. So I was just like journaling for myself all the stuff that was happening. And I was just like, well, I should blog about this. So originally I started a blog, super anonymous. I was like, I'm disguising everything. I mean, it was kind of pointless because I had like one reader. I was like, I'm keeping it so hidden because this is so weird. And then just kind of evolved as time went on.
So how did your number of readers or from the blog, did it like, what number was it at?
Oh, I mean, the blog, I did nothing to promote. It was more just like journaling because I didn't really want people to read it. So I probably had like 5 readers. I basically kept it hidden, didn't do any SEO, no promotion. So when I decided I was going to write a book, I didn't even really continue the blog. I reached out to some outlets to write articles. I started social media and then kind of fluctuated if I was going to go any further or not. And then finally there was kind of a few kicks in the ass that made me go forward with it. So
I love it. I love it. I know when I was writing my book,
Mhm.
um, I realized instead of focusing on all the mess, that I was going to focus on the message that I wanted to, share with the world. And I think that you captured that. And one chapter 9 caught my eye because I was like, is she writing about partially about me? It was 3 a.m. and I was scrolling through my emails. Now,
Yes, yes.
you call it, you reference it here as grief insomnia, but I went through a period of time where every single day, 7 days a week, I was waking up at exactly 3 a.m. every single day. Now, of course, I like to do some Googling. So I was like, is it menopause? Like what's going on? Um, but then, and again, we're not going to give them everything that's in the book. Um, when I saw one in my fake email for Medium's inbox saying that the Windbridge medium Laura Lynn, my name is Lisa Lynette Jackson, was holding some event called Connecting with the Other Side in New York. Tell us a little bit about this, because when I was, and I have to be honest, when I was reading, I had to do some Google because there were some terms that I did not understand, which is a benefit for me because I love learning something new. If I read a book
Same.
and I learn nothing, all I did was just read. But tell us about the Medium workshop.
Sure. Well, this medium workshop, I'll just back up. This medium I wrote about, she was one among the first I met. She actually ended up introducing me to my mentor in this world. And so this specific workshop, I guess at this point, I was super skeptical. I also knew this woman had been studied by universities, scientists, a research department called Windbridge that uses up to quintuple blinded studies, studying psychic mediums, making sure they're getting accurate information under very tight control. So she was coming to me very highly recommended. So I was really nervous because I was like, if she proves to not be genuine or seems like she's not good at what she does, then that means all these scientists who I had been relying on weren't good at assessing or, weren't genuine. So I went to this workshop and she was talking about ways that her abilities work, a lot from an experiential standpoint. And again, this was very early. I cannot believe this woman ever talked to me again. I raised my hand every 5 minutes and I was like, right, but Stephen Hawking says this can't be true. So how do you back up this? How do you back up this? Every 5 minutes, another question. And she just like eventually, very politely, but like kind of stopped answering my questions. But it was just fascinating. And I actually ended up introducing myself, exchanging emails with her, which evolved into my meeting my mentor through her. But just learned fascinating things. Like, she was so normal. That was one of the things. I expected her to either be really weird or just really like spammy and con artisty and like, oh, I have a message for you, darling, and come to this and buy this, and very upselly. And she was not at all like that. She was like a presenter you would see at like a startup event on like fundraising, just so normal, likable, very grounded in how she spoke. She didn't give anyone readings that day. And, it just, I couldn't find any fraud. I couldn't find any cheating. And I couldn't find any of that personality traits that you see, or behavioral traits you see when people are trying to like high pressure sales you or get stuff from you.
I hate
that.
those. And you know what?
It's the worst.
It's the worst. And I'm not going to say that I was a victim to it. I willingly participated in something that was very salesy and very costly, but the person tapped into my emotional side, and I got reeled in very, very quickly. But so I totally get it about being skeptical, because you just never know, right?
You never know. And I mean, she's making, I believe, the line, sorry, my dog Pickles is being very vocal. I hope
Hi,
he's
Pickles.
not. Hi, Pickles. He probably hears someone in the hall, which is making him go crazy. Yeah, I think all of us at some point have gotten sucked into some of that because they're so prevalent in our society, and they do tap into emotional wishes. And, I think everyone has ended up with some varying degree of that. But yeah, this one was doing none of that. And she wasn't like, there are also people you meet that are very believy and they say astronomical things, but they're hard to believe. Like, you believe they're being honest, but you're not going to believe what they're saying. And she was just so factual in how she spoke and so grounded. She's like, I experience it like this. I know this. And I was like, there's something really weird going on that I just, can't begin to understand. And, she also liked to be challenged and was really comfortable with skeptical questions. And I think
and you were doing this the whole time, right?
Oh, every 5 minutes. I was so annoying.
But you know what? You probably showed her that you were genuine in your quest for understanding, right?
Yeah.
I think oftentimes when we ask questions, people think that we're being a certain type of way. But if you're asking questions for understanding, as opposed to like bully somebody or, some other form of things that people do, I think it's received well. And how else will you learn unless you ask the questions?
I agree completely. And I think if people take questions as if you're fighting or challenging them when you're not, like, maybe there's a reason, maybe they can't back up what they're saying and aren't, for whatever reason, aren't comfortable just saying, I don't know. There's something really to be said for if someone asks you a question or asks an expert a question to just say, I don't know. I mean, I think that makes me trust people a lot more than if they try to fabricate a full answer. So,
So what's your favorite part of the book? I mean, as an author, I feel like we all have a favorite part of our book. Which part of the book brought you the most joy? I know for me, I think it was like the end, but
the closing line.
Right.
I think it was about like looking back at this time with these people who've become my friends and mentors and really important people in my life, and seeing like the early stages of development of the relationships, which were, a lot of them were really funny. As I said, a lot of them I thought were con artists, and I was just harassing them with questions, or I'd act really weird because I'd be at events with them and some were mediums and I was still on their wait list. And I'm like, they can know nothing about me or it's going to contaminate the evidence of my reading. I think one of my favorite chapters is probably when we go to my mentor's friend and Bob's house, and one of the big themes is how careful I'd been around Laura and not telling her anything, the one you just mentioned, Laura Lynn Jackson, and then it just all completely falls apart that weekend. And I thought, through no fault of mine, and I thought that was pretty funny. It's just like the best laid plans, and it was don't work, and I thought that was really funny. And yeah, looking back on these people, remembering the first times I met them and how different it is now, because I'm writing a second book about everything that's happened after this book. And yeah, some have become some of my best friends. So it's
I
just
feel like this needs to be a movie, actually.
Oh, I agree. I agree. Any movie producers, investors, anyone listening, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. And I would love it to be a movie. Thank you.
Well, and the reason why I say that is because I feel like a lot of people don't read. But they will watch a movie and have a better understanding, because sometimes when we read, we can't step into the themes in the story. Mm-hmm. But if we see it, it's actually playing out, like the mediums playing out on the screen. People will probably understand them. And this is something that's really not, I believe, in mainstream media. I think it's something that is out there, but not out there. I think, and one of my other audience guest members was talking about how mainstream media publishes only what they want us to really know, right? They have programmed us to a certain way.
There is a lot of that. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I wish all this was out there more. Everyone's trying to figure out why it's not, because a lot of it's being peer reviewed in science journals, but no one's really talking about it, and we can't fully figure out why.
Well, here's a word that you said that a lot of people don't know: peer reviewed, right? Having gone through a doctoral journey, I definitely understand the concept of having a gigantic box of peer-reviewed articles and combing through articles and trying to make sense of it. So that's probably one reason, because it's not as exciting to, I would say, probably the younger generation, right? They may not be as in tune, as open to things that are not on TikTok or Instagram or any of those places. So
well, I have it on TikTok and Instagram if people want to follow there.
So. That is great. Hey, so we will make sure that we include that in the show, because those that are, open to learning something new that goes outside of what they've been programmed to learn about, you talk about religion, organized religion. This is definitely, a little outside of that space. So what would you say? So I have the book, right? But someone who doesn't have the book, why should they buy the book?
Well, I mean, it depends what you're going through. If are they dealing with their own grief? I mean, first of all, death and mortality affects 100% of us. So this affects everybody, whether directly at this stage in your life or down the line. This is something that will apply to all of us in different ways. And it's curiosity, I think, it's one of the things that gets me through everything. It's, I think, one of the most important aspects of life. We're here, be curious about it. It's really interesting. It takes really fascinating kind of complex topics. Like, in one sense, what happens when we die and is one of the most complicated concepts. And this is a whole approach that's just lesser known. Like, there's the University of Virginia, for example, is doing scientific research into this topic. And I touch upon that. And I touch upon, again, Woodbridge Institute, which is in Arizona, which is a scientific research lab studying this. And that's just stuff nobody knows, that there's tangible reasons. So even if you're really set in believing in your religion, or you're really set believing that consciousness is created by a brain when you die, that's it. It's still it's just interesting to learn about. And I write about it in a very approachable way. It's like, I really wanted to keep the tone simple and as if you're my friend and we're sitting and having a coffee, because it can be heavy topics. Yeah. It's like grief, and then consciousness and brain neurons. And so I keep it like really light, really funny, like really funny things happen along the way. And I just think sometimes with heavy topics, you don't necessarily want to read about them in a heavy tone. And I always learn best if someone really approaches me in a very conversational instead of an academic tone. So, and
Yeah.
it's really funny. It's like, I mean, that's it. It's some moments are sad, but it's, it's like kind of, it's a light read in a lot of ways.
Yes, I did have a glass of wine during one of the portions. I'll just tell you,
Oh,
but
I don't believe it.
there was one on the back of the book. Because a lot of times before I start reading, I look at the back, and what
Yes.
really drew me in, what if everything you thought you knew about how the world worked was challenged? What
Mhm.
if everything you thought you knew was challenged? That sums it up, because it's about what you thought you knew versus what actually could be happening, right? What is backed by some scientific knowledge, scientific studies, peer-reviewed articles. Um, Again, you talk about your biggest WTFs. Tell me what's the biggest WTF.
Oh my God. I mean, it was day to day, I'd say. Like it evolves as time goes on. There's multiple. Early on, like the first medium reading that I was getting a medium reading and the woman was accurate. I'm like, how? How is she doing this? How the fuck is she doing this? And then I would say there were one of the biggest what the fucks or WTFs that I experienced was so I went to a convention of scientists and mediums being put together by this organization, the Forever Family Foundation, that was founded by a couple that ended up becoming like my second parents, like mentors to me. And in one part, they had where certain of the guests and attendees were there to see if they had their own mediumship abilities. And there's a panel of the mediums. Again, these are mediums that have been certified by scientists. A lot have participated in up to quintuple blinded studies. When they give readings, like to get approved for Forever Family Foundation, they're under really tight blinded controls. They're not allowed to get generic information like you lost a grandparent and they loved you. Like they have to be specific. So just to give this a little
Context.
credibility. Yeah. So people are getting up, giving readings. At this point, I don't even think this is probably true. Most likely, I'm like, there's still a catch. There's still a catch. And as a joke, the founder of the organization, the co-founder, Bob Ginsberg, the husband, was like, Liz, why don't you get up and give a reading to people? I was like, right, sure. And then I had taken a class with one of the people there who's involved. His name's Lloyd Arbach. He researches all of this. And I'd taken a class on just learning about these abilities. And we also learned a lot about cold reading, which is like giving fake readings, which is great at a party for entertainment, for stage. But, if you're lying about it, that's pretty horrible. So, he wanted us to learn and be aware of the techniques. And again, he actually does performances in mentalism, which is fake mediumship reading or fake psychic readings, which is stage magic. And again, if no one's lying and they're doing it at a like the Magic Castle, that's great, or a birthday party. So I said, okay, well, I'll get up and do a cold reading. And I was feeling physiologically so weird. I don't know. I felt like these waves moving through my body. And I just thought, well, I'd been coming out of like the worst stages of my earlier grief. I assume this was my brain neurons just like resynapsing in some way, however it would be described. So I go and pick one of the mediums to give a reading to that would clearly be fake, that medium Laura, because I'd read her book. So I started trying to get stuff from her book. I say a few things and I was feeling weirder and weirder. And I could suddenly, like, my mind went completely blank. I couldn't think of a thing to say from her book aside from some things that talked about some losses. And I was like, I'm not going to talk about someone's losses as like entertainment. That's not right. So I was trying to come up with stuff from her book that was just very like shallow and light and fun, and I could think of nothing. I have no idea how long I was standing there, but I was feeling weirder and weirder. I have no idea why I chose this one, but I walked over to another medium. I didn't know him at all at this point. His name's Joe Shiel. And I just started feeling so weird. Like all those waves are like moving really intensely through my body. And then they all consolidated in my heart and were like bursting. And I was like, did someone die of a heart attack? He's like, yes. They all went to my brain and were like bursting in my brain. I was like, did someone have a brain tumor? I was like, no, they're bursting. It'd be an aneurysm. He's like, yes. And that's not accurate enough information to be a professional medium. They would need to say like your grandfather, possibly give their name, like died of an aneurysm, a little gentler than that maybe, but those specifics. But nevertheless, I was just like, what the fuck is going on? Like, it's so weird. And everything I was saying was verified. And that happened to me one other time when I was taking a class. Doesn't happen to me 99% of the time, but it really changed my mindset because I was like, this is a lot of how mediums talk about feeling things. And I always, most of the time, was just like, oh, if they're not 100% accurate, they're so full of shit. They're fishing. They're trying to get me to give information. And even though while I was thinking that, I had readings where I'd given a fake name, Google Voice, had friends pay and not gave any of my information. They were getting accurate information. So I had seen people, quote unquote, do this, but it was
Wow.
still, it was so weird. I don't know what to
Well, you
say.
know what? I guess for me, you say it's weird, but I will let you know something. When I first looked at it, the word medium and researched, I grew up in the Black church, and there are oftentimes prophets that will come to church and they will prophesize to someone about, what's going on in their life and what they're dealing with. And so I equate that to really the same concept because I've actually seen it.
Yeah.
And, as a person who probably overanalyzes things, I'm like, did they get the list before they came? Did they know who was going through what? Right. But
Right.
I've seen witness situations where people have been given a reading and it was spot on. And I've
Amazing.
never researched anything
Mhm.
about, readings before, looking at your book. But I have gone up to someone and had said something to them and it was spot on. As well as someone has come up to me. I was sitting in the airport one time and someone said, I was just sitting there waiting on my flight. I was in the Atlanta airport, and this lady came up to me and she said, "Are you a motivational speaker?" And I was like, "Yeah." Now, I had never seen this lady in life. I was all bundled up in the airport, just kind of trying to stay out of the area of the crowds. And so, while some people might not believe that it's true, I
I
personally
agree.
believe that there's some validity.
Thank
So,
you. Yeah, it's wow. And that's amazing you had those experiences growing up because not many people are exposed to that. And from what I understand, most religious organizations are not open to stuff like that. I mean,
yeah,
I can't speak for,
it's probably a
it's
different
very
name,
cool.
right? It's similar, but a different name, right? When you say
Mhm.
mediums, people are like, what do you mean, small, medium, and large, right? So
Right,
I
right.
think it's all about the terminology as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it does come with a lot of stigma, that terminology, like psychic medium. People assume fraud. And I mean, I get it. I of course did before too. And
Well, I mean, I don't know how old you are, but I'm 51, right? And so
mm,
growing up, you saw the psychic hotline, right? You call
mm,
in and you get a reading,
mhm,
or you like sometimes you drive through neighborhoods and you'll see like somebody has a sign in their yard that they'll come in and do a reading. Now, I've personally have never actually gone to one of those places or called the phone to get a reading because it was not necessarily something that I was interested in, but it is something that is interesting, right? Having witnessed someone else getting that in the environments that I've been in. So um
yeah. Yeah. Growing up around New York a lot, they're still there. You see all the signs like come in for $5 readings, but most of and then, I mean, I'm a little bit younger than you, like mid-30s, but they would have like psychic.com and they still had like, you'd hear all those hotlines, but a lot of them are frauds. I mean, those that way. Like I've been warned, and I'd like to maybe try a few more just in different contexts to see too, just for research. But yeah, I went to one of those ones on the street, and it was exactly what I expected. It was completely fraudulent. Could there be some that aren't? Probably. There's tons of them, and not everyone knows about marketing. So maybe it's someone who that's all they've seen and they have these weird abilities and they're like, that's what I should try to do. So you never know. But
Yeah. So as we close our interview today, what's number one, how can our listening viewing audience find you?
so you can go to my website. It links to all my social media. I'm mainly active on Instagram and TikTok. And you can find me at WTFJustHappened.net.
I love it. I love it. They won't forget that, right?
I hope
They will
not.
not. They will not forget that because it's such a catchy title. Now I just have a question because I was just wondering, what's behind the graphic that you chose for the front cover?
Well, that credit goes to my graphic designer and visual branding expert, Amanda Guarasio at Studio Guarasio. And I described the personality of the book, and she read it. I was like, it's about grief and examining an afterlife, but sciencey perspective and fun. I mean, you could tell from the title, it's a lighter title. So she just sent some options that kind of encapsulated all of that. And I picked that one. And, she picked colors that would, get the whole branding palette. So,
Yes. Well, you know what really caught my eye? So a couple of things. Number one, I feel like the person was meditating, maybe asleep. But I also saw some brokenness, right? Because of how the legs were laid. So I'm always reading too much. I'm not doing readings, but I was reading too much into what I was looking at. Just, because like how the arms are like this, right? So I was just visualizing different things before I got into the book because I'm always just trying to set the stage for what I think is going to be in the book as I'm going through it.
Did it match up with what you expected?
Yes, yes.
Good.
I still was expecting like something different, but for me,
Okay.
if a book is not an easy read, I can't get through it. So I love easy reads, right? Because it'll take me longer. So,
Right.
and I like how you have these conversations, if you will, throughout the book, which breaks up the monotony of the paragraphs, right? So I won't tell everybody anything else. They can get their own copy. And speaking of, where can they get a copy of the book?
So again, you can link to all the places to get it on my website. It's on Amazon. That's usually the place most people get books. And again, that's where you can get Kindle. It's also, all the places like Barnes and Noble, either the paper or the Nook, Apple Books. And I am in the process of like coming very close to launching the audiobook. That takes a lot more time than I realized, but
it does.
It's moving along. It's moving along. And then my second book, which will also link on my website, will be coming out this spring, summer. So,
Oh, I love it. So I actually just finished recording 12 chapters, or my book is only 12 chapters, but I've just finished recording. And you are right. It is a lot more work than I thought it was going to be.
Audiobooks are so much work. Oh my God, it's crazy. I mean, such time. I mean, because you have to go slowly. I made the mistake of just powering through it, and all the parts where I powered through it, my voice was horrible. So I have to re-record like half my book.
Well,
Did
and
you notice that too?
Well, you know what? I went through a studio and they only would allow you to book 3 hours at a time. Because they
Okay.
had a producer that was listening. And so he had the book in his hand, I had the book in my hand. And so if we got to a point where he wanted me to re-record, but he said no more than 3 hours a day. So I did mine in 2 sessions, but I still have to go back and re-record a few areas because I found some errors that I wanted to change, type A, right? So I found some errors that I wanted to change. But I too am working on my second book. And it's a lot of fun to write the book because it helps you grow and learn. As I was thinking about how you keep infusing the scientific knowledge, that's something that's been really weighing heavy on me for my next book, where I want to infuse some, not a whole lot, because I don't want it to be too heavy, but some empirical information into the book, because I think it supports further reading and exploration of the topic that I'm going to be focusing on.
Oh, I'm curious to read. Can you say the topic, or is it you're waiting till it's
Not
out?
yet, but I will let
Not
you
yet.
know. I will let you
Okay.
know. But I really have been, as I'm meeting with other authors, reading your books, I've been reflecting on, like my first book, I just wrote by talking to the computer and crying and all of that. Really was getting the concepts out. But as I was writing that first book, I was like, there's a second book and a third book out of this. And so
Yep.
I've been talking to the computer and let the computer capture the words. Then I need to
Yeah.
sit down and reorganize them and actually now start my research part. So that's where I'm at next.
Yeah.
What articles I want to infuse. So, but I
Ooh,
will
okay. So
definitely
I'm
let you
curious
know.
to read it now. Oh, it sounds good.
Yes, I will definitely let you know. I won't be doing any mediums, right? I got to stay in my lane.
I, I don't think most people go this route. I think
Yes.
or if they do, they take a very like non-scientific approach.
Yes.
Although they're more scientists out there researching this than anyone had any idea. So
Well, and I love science. Love, love, love science.
so interesting, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's
Well,
fascinating.
I want to thank you so much for your time today. Any final parting words for our listening, viewing audience?
Yeah, I guess I'll just say like anything is worthy of investigation. Like keep an open mind, stay curious, as I say in like my closing my podcast. You don't have to draw any conclusions, but it's just worth having a quick read of just Googling online a little bit about some of these scientific labs that are studying this because it's worth considering.
It's worth having the knowledge, right? You may
Right,
choose
right.
not to use it, but it's better to
Mhm.
have the knowledge than not to have it.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
All right. Well, everyone, this has been another episode of 52 Authors, 52 Weeks. I just finished chatting with the Elizabeth Entin, author of WTF Just Happened. Get your copy today.